G'day legends, I hope that you are having a fantastic day and so far you are having a fantastic week. Now as I go through my chemotherapy, I just want to thank you all for your support and your messages. It does mean a lot. As we step into the later half of this week, expect some time off, expect to see some confusion on myself as well. My brain does struggle with the chemo fog, but thank you guys for everything. Now, legends, of course, as always, we do have a lot to go over, and I hope that today's video is going to be one of my better ones. So I do have information directly off the front line talking about those FPV drones that we've been speculating about operating far further than we had seen previously. And this has really only been in the past 2 weeks that we've been observing this, and now I have real info off the front line of someone I know, so they're 100% there, as well as what the reality actually is at the front line now too. And off another contact who said we were fighting these dudes in this village yesterday, now the maps are also reflecting that. So we've got a lot there to go over. And then we need to go over then the reality of what is happening. And what I've been saying over the past couple of videos is a lot of these narratives, a lot of this rhetoric is now coming apart at the seams. And what 2 weeks ago would have been seen as Kremlin talking points, Putin's right-hand man, blah, 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 and now coming into the mainstream narrative of actually being the reality of what is happening. Now, I do really wonder for like those on YouTube who completely push propaganda and are not willing to actually go against or go up against information that doesn't fit their narrative. I do wonder what the future is in these audiences, or will the Kool-Aid just continue to be drunk? And every time I talk about this, many people will get at me and go, Willie, but you were drinking the Kool-Aid for some time. And I'm like, yeah, well, for some time, yes, I was. But as I've grown in myself and as a reporter or analyst or whatever you'd like to call me, I like to think that I'm somewhat coming out or above that, maybe. Then, of course, today we'll be looking at the maps, looking at some footage, comparing maps also. And then we need to go over those large strikes that we had seen over the past, say, 48, maybe 72 hours at the point of you seeing this video, and the amount of missiles and the drones, but also the improvement of that, but also the state of Ukraine's air defense system. So there's a lot in that too, but let's get into it and let's start here. So source, anonymous, but off the front line, talking about areas around different front lines from the south to the east. As you know, the situation isn't looking good, referring to Pokrovsk. I can confirm that on the ground, manpower and medical staff are a big problem. Russian fiber optic drones have gotten better in the past 2 weeks. We were told that one fiber drone went 21 plus miles. Of course, in further conversations here, they're very worried about medical stabilization points, which are that 10 or more kilometers off the front line. Casualty evacuation has become critical, in some cases impossible, given the vehicles or resources needed to pull back to even then stabilization points. Logistics are getting far more difficult to bring in and off the front line, as well as command points as well, with that now extended range in only the past 2 weeks of these longer range or medium range fiber optic drones. And these are a real problem. Now, what we see here is this footage coming out through a lot of pages of this is said to be Kharkiv, 28 kilometers from the nearest line. Oh, probably can't hear it. Of a Russian FPV drone. And what we do know is we're getting more and more evidence that these drones, from people on the front line that I know, saying, hey, these are a real menace. They're operating far further back, and that fits our observations. What exactly is going on there, we don't really know. I'm trying to dig in as much as I can on the back end using my sources to bring that to you guys. But then speaking more about then casualties, I got this message as well, again, of another confirmed source. In addition, some brigades, Ukrainian brigades, have lost more men in 2 months than they have in the past 10 months. And this goes against a lot of what you will hear online. But again, we would expect to see this as attritional war then grinds on, and as things get worse very slowly, you can see things pick up and get worse very quickly in some cases as well. And I spoke to him about this and he said there's a lot of factors here, but it's going back into what these other gentlemen said about that medical staff are a huge problem, manpower is a huge problem, but the weapons to target, they keep developing as well, especially that logistics capability to be struck now 20, 30, 40 kilometers behind the line. So wait out on more confirmation. I'm doing my very best to get you guys as much as I can, talking to soldiers and people in the industry, all of that. Remember, anything you send me, I firstly will try and confirm if I don't know you already. But of course, everything will be kept encrypted and as anonymous if you wish to. Of course, yesterday, what I spoke about was I said, a guy said to me, "Hey, Willie, I was just fighting enemy troops in this village. It's not shown on the maps." So let me show you this. This is Ukraine, the center of your screen, capital of Kyiv, red areas, occupies as 22, the purple since 2014. Of course, we have then Kursk, Russia, Sumy, Ukraine. And what we spoke about was this guy said in this Konstantinivka and Volodymyrivka that, hey, I was just fighting dudes in here. The Russians have crossed the border in these sectors. And now Suryak maps today, he's showing in the direction of this Volodymyrivka that the Russians have crossed the border in here, and he's saying that this is now connecting to the Bilovody front line in here. So all the way across where they've crossed now, all the way up to, well, we know there was a Russian VDV flag pop up. Where was it? I can't remember. It was about here, maybe, yesterday. Oh, no, sorry, that's wrong. It popped up. I was looking for these tree lines. It popped up, I believe, on this tree line right here. There's a VDV flag, and he's saying that now this is connected all the way through to where this border then turns up to the north too. So this sector coming under more control, and it seems like the Russians are having a lot more success, at least kilometre squares wise, in Sumy than in other front lines at the moment. But what we need to remember is every day that this continues advancing with these losses and whatever, Ukraine's cards on the table become less and less. Also, unless we see a large shift on the front line and to do with a lot of these factors of attritional war. Do I believe it's likely to see that? No, I think it will just keep degrading into a worse and worse deal somewhere down the line when it actually gets looked at. And this is, in the beginning of the video, I spoke about, we see a lot of like large narrative shifts. And I want to talk about this then post here. Now, this isn't a full write-up, but this is just a quick summary of what this Mr. Tim Dzita says. Now, he is a pro-Ukrainian blogger, analyst, and he's attached to the Belgian Ministry of Defense. So clearly there is a pro-Ukraine bias in this, which makes it even more interesting. And this is how we see reports, news, intelligence, all this rhetoric changing very rapidly from what we had seen previously. And just a little bit more information on Tim, Belgian expert working on multinational procurements of munitions within NATO. You know, this guy is as in as you could be, okay, if that makes sense. So we need to approach this even with that bias and give an idea of how that is just now completely doing a shift. And it's going to be very interesting and see if these Kaja Kallas, Ursula von der Leyen, Mark Rutte, any of these actually take accountability for what was said. And I would say to YouTubers as well, I wonder if these YouTubers will take accountability for what was said. And I absolutely will say that it was points I was really drinking the Kool-Aid and not questioning more than I should have. But some have based their entire professional career on that Kool-Aid. So this is what Mr. Dzita says. No collapse, no peace. Russia can sustain its war through 27 and beyond. From General Christopher Cavoli, Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, Russia will be able to fight for at least 2 more years at the current level of losses. Now, with any figures, take them with a grain of salt on the opposing side. Any enemy figures that anyone gives you, whether it is Ukraine to Russia, Russia to Ukraine, Willie to someone I don't like, or someone I don't like to Willie, any of these casualty figures are going to be inflated. So you're already working on inflated figures, okay? Despite losing 400,000 soldiers per year, Russia continues to replenish forces at scale. In 25 alone, it is expected to field 1,500 tanks, 3,000 armoured vehicles, and 250,000 plus artillery shells a month. Russian force generation has exceeded NATO forecasts. May have losses maybe been less than NATO's forecasts as well. Anyway, as of early 24, the Russian army had grown by 15% since the full-scale invasion. It is restoring Soviet-era equipment, but also producing new T-90s and APCs. The manpower pool is deep, with 4 times Ukraine's male population aged 20 to 39, your primary fighting ages. Also in this, though, is when we talk about attritional warfare, People believe that 1-to-1 is neutral attrition. No, it is not. If you're dealing with a country with 4 times your male fighting population, Ukraine needs to be at a minimum of 4-to-1 at neutral there as well, okay? And I highly, highly doubt that. We're seeing Russian forces grow. Could that be because a lot of predictions about casualties were far more than they actually were? Russia's war economy is real and accelerating. 40% of Russia's 25 federal budget is earmarked for defence and security. Civilian sectors are squeezed, but not collapsing. Russia is not the USSR in 1989. You, me, and Dr. Connolly, we spoke about this. What Russia is spending now is not close to what the USSR was spending, what had major impact on the collapse. And then let's look further in his actual written up article. We can look at the Russian military spending from 21 to 24, 25, and what then we presume is going to be in these then years following, compared to what, and this is percentage of GDP, compared to where the Soviets actually were. And I actually think this is on the low end of an estimate for Soviets. Now, this is sitting around, let's go 13%. I've heard much, much higher than that, but it's much more difficult to get ideas. Military spending levels as a percent of GDP are nowhere near the estimated Soviet levels of the mid-80s. Russia's economy has and will continue to face strains. Amid these strains, we can expect some analysts to continue to make dire predictions, some, all, arguing that the Russian economic collapse is imminent. We've heard this for years. It is also plausible the Russian economy will continue to muddle through the faster economic growth than much of Western Europe over the past years. If so, the Russian military menace is unlikely to disappear anytime soon. As this gentleman here says, the Russian military industry remains a formidable machine. It is likely to continue to be able to muddle along, producing good enough systems that will still represent a significant threat to Ukraine, NATO and allies. This is especially true for a standoff and asymmetric capabilities that have not yet been engaged in the war against Ukraine. And as we've said, a number of those strategic systems have not been engaged in this war. And some of those have actually become more powerful as per the US 2025 threat assessment. Not pulling that out of my ass. It's from the fucking Pentagon has said that. And as well, all of this is laced too with a bias to make it look more rosy than it actually may be. And these good enough systems, but this is where I believe the West is not ready in attritional protracted war is still an economic battle. And good enough systems has led to the quantity then overriding the quality of these systems. Now, where were we? Civilian sectors are squeezed, but it's not the USSR. Russian GDP is growing faster than many EU states. Strategic endurance beats fiscal efficiency. On the battlefield, artillery dominance defines positional warfare phase. Again, 5-kilometre advancements in days. It's not positional. It's protracted, it's attritional, but it's not any more positional. Russian units fire 5 times more shells daily than Ukraine. Okay, so again, this artillery parity that we hear, again, I don't believe it. And artillery, in my mind, I actually put drones and FABs as an extension of artillery, and that would widen that gap more. Without sustained Western aid, Ukraine faces a deepening firepower gap. Western assumptions of Russian exhaustion have proven consistently wrong. Mobilisation and training pipelines are working. Domestic political control remains tight. Defence production, even if low-tech, is good enough, fast enough, and cheap enough to matter. In a war like this, though, good enough, fast enough, cheap enough, that is in a large-scale war, or in all of my reading, that is actually what you should aim for more. Aim for having 250,000 good enough shells rather than 10,000 really good shells. Meanwhile, the US is dialing back its support posture under President Trump. Europe is slow to fill the gap in artillery, armour and drones. Not only is slow unable to in many of those sectors as well. Ukraine's lines are held, but fragile, and attrition favours Russia over time. A lot of the lines are not held, they are moving. And yes, the attrition, as what I showed you in the beginning of some units or some brigades have lost more in the past 2 months than the last 10 months, over time that attrition will favour, in what he says, Russia more and more. And it could be the event horizon has been crossed. We just don't know it yet. The danger is not just tactical, it's strategic. If Ukraine falters, Russia's reconstituted force may turn elsewhere. So while they have a massive military and industry, will they look at other sectors or other theatres to employ into? Cavoli warns, Russia could regain major offensive potential by 2030. We are very, very close to that. Remember, when all of these people, these fucking leaders were telling us Russia has used that many weapon systems, they've got nothing left, that for 5 decades they will be demilitarized due to what is spent. Now it's looking like they are more powerful than they begun. And what I'll say is, would you rather fight 2022 Russia or 2025 Russia? They're likely, if you answer yes to that, which I think most people would say you'd rather fight 22 than 25, then it's actually become more powerful, which goes in line with a lot of Russian history around warfare, from Napoleon to then the Second World War. But also Mark Rutte, he has then said this as well, that by 2030, there'll be more offensive potential then too. So that just goes against all of what we were told in years. No one's going to take fucking accountability for that. And I can't believe audiences and voting members of the public don't hold anyone to account for this. Like, I can't believe a lot of YouTubers' comments are just filled of like, you said this and you haven't at least even addressed it. Delayed Western readiness today may mean crisis tomorrow. The Kremlin is not waiting for a peace deal. It's rearming for a long war. NATO and Ukraine's allies must stop assuming collapse and start planning for containment, deterrence, and victory through industrial parity. And this is like, well, better worded than we would say, but like we have said, that I believe a lot of the Western strategy towards Ukraine was never to have Ukraine win. It was to have Russia lose through collapse and cost. But if that's not working, well, what is your plan somewhere else? And that is the crux of a lot of my argument, is that we were relying on a Russian loss, a Russian failure, a Russian collapse, rather than a Ukrainian all-out victory. And what I say is, well, if that's not going to happen, what then is your plan if plan A has fallen off? Now, let's have a look at a couple more things in this that he has spoken about. By 2035, Russia will have roughly 1.2 to 3.6 million fewer military-age males than in 35, according to then the UN Population Division forecast. However, even their 95% lower bound forecast for 2035, so the worst off, leaves a total population of Russian males aged between 20 and 44, so fighting age, at 20 million. The number is greater than half of Ukraine's total population. So still a massive amount of men fit in that sector, even in the lower bound. Okay, so it's still very, very large. It's still going to be a very powerful nation rebuilding after this, just off population, industry, and lessons learnt of this too. And I think now we're seeing a lot of these analysts go, shit, what happens following this also? Monthly shell production, this should concern people way more than anything, is the EU's, and remember, these are targets. So Russia's is the estimated at 2,000, 250,000 a month. And the targets here are well below that being reached. And this is inexcusable. And the former senior officers, I think, have a lot to answer for. Of how has that got into such a poor way? But again, let's speak back on this, that assuming collapse, start planning deterrence and victory through industrial parity. Again, that industrial parity is going to be very, very difficult with much more than expensive industry from much more expensive energy. Again, this war, I think, will define a lot in Europe and generations to come. So let's actually then have a look at the maps. And I just wanted to show you this. I'm not interested in things going bang, but what we see here is something that I was being told, and it's on Twitter, that this is the most stupid thing ever, Russian assault units on motorcycles. And me as a former infantryman has gone, in this type of war, it actually makes complete sense to have a highly mobile, light, quiet vehicle on the front line that can move in and out. When we hear Ukrainians, like in the video I shared yesterday, saying the day of the age of the tank is fucking gone due to weapon systems, and now we see a large-scale Ukrainian attack or movements on then quad bikes being targeted by a Russian drone, like we've seen multiple times of Ukrainian drones targeting Russians on motorcycles. I'm not surprised one bit to see it. I'm actually surprised it took this long to start seeing en masse vehicles like motorcycles or scooters or buggies on the front line. It makes complete sense to me. And again, I pose you the question, would you rather, you and your boys, you and your section of 10, be in one armoured vehicle cruising the front, or 10 more maneuverable vehicles. And I pose it from the other side as well. You're in a trench line with your boys. Would you rather see one armoured vehicle coming towards you, and you've got drones and ATGMs, or 10 motorcycles which can disperse and assault? Okay, so let's have a look at the maps. Here we have, I've explained it. So this isn't a surprise at all to see on the Pokrovsk eastern sector that above Keremig, between Kalinove, Sukobalka, Romanivkia, that this envelopment has now closed up. Of course, we've still got the other envelopment through to Zoroya, Romanivkia. A Russian flag went up right above the A today. We can just explain it that way. I don't need to show it. I do believe we'll see this close up over the coming days, if not actually already, of this large grey enveloped sector in here. But we need to look at more movements on this entire area on our Pokrovsk east. So there's a lot of changes on this today. So Suryak confirming this movement. He's also showing a lot more movement to the north of Alexandropil and Zoroya, so pushing that front up. Remember what we say, the whole idea of what the Russians are trying to do here is to push and widen. It gives you many advantages and reduces the saturation of artillery and drones, but also a lot of movement in the northern sector, so pushing and going out towards Poltavka, Popov Yar, and to the north of Malanivkia as well. So all the way out where my cursor is drawing as well, and then all the way up to see where some of these mines and areas are, all the way out to here. Again, wait out on this, but also near Marilyubivkia, which is this red dot here, making another envelopment on the eastern side of Pokrovsk. And this is doing two things. It is the eastern flank of Pokrovsk, western flank of Toretsk, but also looking to get in behind some of the more thin defensive works on the way to Dobropilia. And I think we'll see this go up, and then we'll see more of a west and north effort rather than an effort east. But again, wait out on this. Then let's move our way up into Volchansk. Now, what I showed you yesterday, or day before maybe, I did show you TOS1 and FABs working in here and saying this typically means we likely are going to see ground movements. And we can see out to then the east here, some Russian ground movement, and Deep State, they speak about this. Changes took place on the map, northeast Pacific. The first serious attempts begun back in mid-April when the Russians carried assault operations. The enemy's goals are now clear, having hit in the teeth in Volchansk. They'll now try and bypass from left to right. The bombers are storming the right flank of the defence forces. So not being able to move straight through, they're trying to then flank further around. And that does make sense. We've seen multiple times that go in line with this. Now, we'll move our way down, and then we come to then the Terney front. No changes shown on this map today. Remember, I've been saying this is a massive area to keep an eye on. Again, going out and expanding. Now, today, he's saying that the Russian army has made very large movements when we consider the other movements up and down the front line. So during the last 3 days, Russian army made small advances towards Herivkia, increased the control around Novomygalivkia, and in addition, the forces advanced south and north of Rybkadab, as well as south of Lepove. Russian troops captured a serious position south of Zeleny Dolnya. So let's look over a number of areas that Suryak then speaks about. So Rybkadab here, that the Russian forces are to the north and south of Rybkadab by this map, saying that the Russians are really out to about this sector here. So if then bypassed Rybkadab on the south while filling in all the way up to Novomyalivkia and expanding and exploiting further north of that sector as well. And then in Zelena Dolnya, is that what he's best in here? That's speaking of moving through this sector down here by this point. So this is showing large movements, and what I'm saying, well, now the newer longer range FPVs are definitely in action. Maybe this will change things, but I still don't know how numerous those are. I think that anywhere 10 k's of the waterline here, so let's just go Kapivkia, this is the critical sector for seeing a movement of this whole Barova area east of the Oskil. So keep an eye on that. Of course, what that does is that then forms the northern flank of Seversk, but all the way to Slovyansk, Kramatorsk. Of course, those primary strongholds remaining in the Donbass. Now, So first, yesterday I showed you some footage where my cursor is here of Fabs hitting these like first buildings that would be overlooking the large open areas of Russia's movement from east to west in here. And today we do see that there was more fighting just in and around this sector. Remember, it's showing that the Russian forces are all the way up to where this reservoir is sitting, but also Ukrainian counteractions to try and push back the Russians here too. So wait out on that. Now we'll come down into just Pokrovsk actual, like Pokrovsk itself, and we do have a number of things to look at in this as well. That during the last 5 days, Russian army took positions around Borodnivka. On the other hand, it was confirmed Ukrainian army eventually recaptured the locality of Horokove, which is right in here by the blue here as well. Now clashes taking place. So some minor movements, down to the south of here, Ukraine pushing back in these sectors. Again, just wait out on this front. It's hard to know exactly, but we do see crawling towards Dnipro Oblast, what I think will be a major change. Now, what we do here, and we've been hearing this more and more, and this is a good example of this, is we have been told or looking through reports that Russia has upgraded the Garand drone. It flies higher, it flies faster, but also that the body of the drone has become stronger, so it can dive faster at a higher rate of descent as well. What this means is it's out of the range of many systems for a shorter time. And one of the things we can get a better idea of this is just listening to what they used to sound like versus now. Now they sound like a Stuka dive bomber. It's diving. Of course, that's as the propeller goes into overdrive. You can hear that's 50 cal firing by the rate of fire at least. It's definitely not Gepard, and it's much larger than any 7.62. That's 50. So you can hear them diving in onto target. You can still hear them, so there's multiple in there, and that is very dangerous because now they're flying higher than the range of those weapons to hit it. So you've got then now say it's 2 kilometers, in which you can intercept that. It's sitting at 4. It's diving faster. You've got from 2 kilometers to ground level to hit it. That's seconds, and that's diving too. If you've ever gone skydiving to go 6,000 feet, doesn't take long at just normal terminal velocity. And these get to be far faster than just you jumping out of a plane. Now, we get some better numbers. This is AMK speaking about that attack yesterday. He says that there are 89 missiles in total, and over the past couple of days that 500 Garand drones had also been flown into Ukraine. Now, any numbers going off how many of these hit or were intercepted, I don't want to waste my breath on that. It's too speculative. But there was a lot of strikes. But what we know is Russia has not only been able to sustain large attacks, but also increase how many operate in these, and likely the effectiveness of these strikes too. And the stocks of Ukrainian air defense is a huge concern because this is two-pronged. Ukraine's air defense is then depleting as Russia is increasing the amount of systems being fired in. And we see this in this Le Monde article here, that Ukraine's air defense is struggling to keep up with intensifying Russian strikes, that Kyiv is beginning to run out of ammunition to counter these bombardments. More than 2,000 Shahed drones were launched in the past 20 days. It's practically every night a new record is being set. And this is what I was actually looking for in my brain yesterday. This Maria Berlinsky, a prominent Ukrainian expert and director of the Center for Aerial Reconnaissance Support, she said, we are gradually approaching the point where the Russians will be able to launch more than 1,000 Shahed drones per day. So that was the number I was looking for, was correct. I spoke about yesterday. That is seriously concerning, just given that, well, the Shahed Garand drone, we see that a lot of the AA guns from mobile fire teams to Gepards now can't hit these, and just that many by saturation, it makes it impossible to do it with missiles, impossible to do it with choppers or by then fighter aircraft also. The complexity of the flight paths are overwhelming Ukraine's air defense capabilities. That Ukraine managed to mitigate damage by implementing multi-layered system of these light mobile fire units, anti-aircraft Gepards, things like that, medium and long-range missile batteries, helicopters and jets. But of 24, the destruction or diversion, they say, exceeded 90%. Okay, but that is no longer the case. Today, the rate sometimes drops to 30%. So we can probably safely, I think, take into account and say both of those have been inflated. And these upgraded platform, more higher speed, higher altitude, it's going to go down. As they say here, the trend is bad. Since January, the drones have been flying between 2,000 and 3,000 metres in altitude. Yesterday, we had report one was flying at 4,900 metres, so 5 kilometres, close enough to 3 miles. When they dive at 500 kilometres per hour, as that footage I showed you, it's very difficult to hit them. These are now mass-produced near the city of Kazan. These carry 3 times more payload at 90 kilos, so original 30. So much higher payload, much more of them, which should be 1,000 a day, harder to intercept. We see the trend of the cat and mouse of offensive and defensive weapons. Odessa's coastal location is at an additional disadvantage, according to Yakup. We cannot place antennas offshore to disorient these through electronic warfare, and our fighter jets, they do not venture out to sea, where they are vulnerable to Russian missile batteries based in Crimea. Missiles capable of shooting down Shahed drones are just too expensive, and the shortage is already dire. You can't be hitting a $50,000 drone with a $2 million missile. One solution under consideration is a battering ram drone, as we've seen FPVs against things like all-land drones. A cheap weapon that costs between 20 and 50 times less than its target. That I highly doubt. If you've got a Garand flying at, say, 4 kilometres high, these battering rams, something to be able to keep up with that, to go 600 kilometres an hour, which an FPV drone cannot do, big enough to take that out and keep up with it at that altitude, it's not going to be $1,000 drone, at least in my opinion. I think that is great. If anything, it's probably going to be more, typically defensive measures are more expensive than offensive measures than this game. But again, we will see. But we also do know that sometimes Russia, or at least claiming to entrap some of these fighter aircraft by sending in drones so the fighter aircraft go in the air, and then they'll put out, say, a Su-35 with a air-to-air missile on it to try and take down aircraft that then are conducting air defence. But at the end of the day, like an F-16, they don't carry that much ammunition, really. There's still an air superiority fighter to take these down. This is exactly what we said, is it's probably not the best aircraft to be doing the job it's doing. These are air superiority fighters. Of course, can conduct a multi-role, but would have something more simple, more tough, something like an A-10 actually done a better job and fly slower stall rate against use in an air defense capacity like this? Again, people like what looks good on paper rather than what might actually fucking work. You see this with tanks. They'd rather put down, we've got 10 Abrams, fucking Yahoo, than we've actually got 100 T-70s and we have a heap of quantity and people ready to go and rock and roll on these. I don't care if people sell an F-16 merch. The cost-time ratio compared to effect has been negative. At best, it's negative. Victory will go to the most creative. The Russians are also innovating. And they have more resources. They have just fired 5 of a new type of missile, which they call the Banderol, into our area. Russia, I think they've got more resources allocated, but the entire of the West is having resources to develop things for Ukraine to go against Russia. But what I will say is we are seeing Russia enter more things into the battlefield and be more innovative with tactics. Things like the motorcycles that then get adapted, things like Blyatbar that then get adapted, fibre optics that then get adapted too. So maybe a lot of these Western companies don't want their weapons to go in and not work, and now that may affect then share prices. I don't know, but I'm surprised we don't see more test equipment entering. I know there is a lot that we don't see. Russia study the results of every attack closely, looking for gaps in our defence. They use increasingly complex trajectories when programming their drones and cruise missiles. They use a lot of physical and electronic decoys. The idea is to exhaust our ammunition and saturate our defences. But orcs can't learn anything. His unit, armed with a battery of NASAMs, a Norwegian system equipped with American missiles as well as Soviet-made S-300s, and also deploys numerous decoys on the ground to trick the adversary. But to meet the growing challenge, he says we need many more long-range systems, such as Patriot, RST, and the French SAMP-T. Today, we have nothing to protect southern Ukraine from ballistic missiles. Ukraine no longer has missiles for its 2 SAMP-T batteries and has not received a single missile in a year and a half. So, France, I know Macron, you're out there getting slapped by your husband, mate, but you have all this rhetoric about whatever it takes, as long as it takes. Ukraine, apparently, according to this gentleman, who I'll much believe over fucking Macron or any other politician, this guy on the ground, why would he lie, saying we haven't received a missile in a year and a half and now we've got no missiles for this. So Macron can go and have hand shandy-a-thon and fucking caviar on a private jet with his mister, but like at the end of the day, rhetoric versus reality, it's just not there. Massive victory will go to the most creative. This is from Inhut, the spokesman for the Ukrainian Air Force. He also revealed that some Shahed drones are now equipped with 16 anti-jamming modules, which makes disabling navigation much more difficult. I believe this is the contact, the same that we saw. Contact? That sounds wrong. Whatever. The same that we've seen in the glide bombs. He welcomed the fact that Western F-16s and Mirage 2000s, given to Ukraine, managed to shoot down Russian drones and missiles on May 25. But none of the 9 ballistic missiles fired that night could be destroyed. End of the day, these systems, they're expensive systems to risk to take down Shaheds. We have seen multiple F-16s go down either through or countering these, whether it was from shrapnel, from ground defence, or from then enemy fire. But these are expensive systems to be doing this and risking. None of the missiles were shot down. He says, we're running out of missiles. There are several Patriot divisions around Kyiv, but they cannot provide 100% protection against these. The battery only covers 25 kilometres. The Russians have found countermeasures. Iskander missiles perform evasive manoeuvres in their final phase. According to the Patriot's trajectory calculations, in addition, the Iskander can release decoys capable of fooling Patriot missiles. The Iskander has had a very long lifespan in this war due to many, many upgrades. Upgrades in hardened software, in policy of use, in kill chain, and in industry as well. Most systems do not have the lifespan that Iskander has. The relentless improvement of weapons and tactics has given rise to a breathless duel between sword and shield. The sword clearly has the upper hand today. Offensive weapons always have the upper hand before defensive measures are made. Give it from bloody bows and arrows, to swords, to machine guns, to drones, to missiles. It is always a cat and mouse and catching up. But again, the Iskander is a very, very deadly system. And as your air defense goes down and their effectiveness goes up, you end up in a very, very bad loop. And I have seen some speculate as it is being reported that Taurus missiles are entering Ukraine, and we've seen an uptick in ballistic strikes on some areas. Are they trying to hit where those may be stored or at the bases? Again, don't know. Legends, you have a fantastic day, and I'll hopefully speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.